Welcome back. Yes, we are doing truth, lies and hair ties this week. We are going to be talking about the loneliest dolphin in the world. And it was Inubosaki Marine Park, which is in Tokyo. It opened its doors in 1954 and it closed its doors in 2018. So it had a good run, but unfortunately after the earthquake and tsunami that struck in 2011, attendance fell quite a lot. I guess it just wasn't as popular, so they decided to shut the park. Now, I don't know about you, but I would be thinking, okay, so what needs to be done? Probably I would need to tell all the staff, you need to go and find work elsewhere. And there's probably a lot of paperwork. What's going to happen with the building? Are we going to keep it? Are they going to sell it? Yes, lots to sort out. And I'm sure I'm forgetting something else. What else is there? Oh, yes, perhaps find accommodation for all the animals that are left, which they did do to a certain extent. But I'm not sure why not all of them were taken somewhere else. It's like they halfway through decided, well, bit tired now, so I don't really know what to do with the rest. You know what? Let's just leave them. So hundreds of reptiles and fish were left. Roughly around 46 penguins were left and one dolphin. You think if you're going to leave something behind, at least make sure there's two of them, if not three or four, but one on their own, I just think was awful. And of course, this was poor old Honey. As you can imagine, this caused a lot of uproar with animal activists, including the International Marine Mammal Project. They were worried that if the animals stayed there, they ran the risk of dying. Now, I think it's the owner's duty to sort out whatever is left. And for me, I think it would have been the most important thing. In fact, the first thing. These animals have brought lots of money into the park, helped you to keep this business going for a very long time. How on earth can you not have the empathy to sort this out? It's just unethical and crazy to think that someone would be happy to sort of just leave them behind. Now, there were reports that staff members were still going back to feed the animals. I don't know if they were still employed or they just felt bad for the animals and obviously wanted to help them. I'm not entirely sure. So, I'm pleased that at least they were being fed. But if you think about it, nothing was being cleaned. So Honey was just in the same water all the time. Nothing was being filtered or changed or, and obviously when they went in and fed them, how long would they stay there? Would they stay there for 10 minutes or 15 minutes? Or, I think I'd want to stay there a lot longer to kind of give Honey something to do or something to look at, or maybe, I don't know, play a ball game with her or something to stimulate her, rather than here's some food that is literally just keeping you alive. It's not doing anything else. Your surroundings, is rather miserable because, of course, at some point the park went into disrepair. You've left it. Really, it's abandoned. So that, some of the pictures which I will show you, it's falling apart. Obviously, the paint is coming off. It's all of this sort of thing that isn't being maintained, and yet you've still got animals that are in this park. Apparently, a few of the local activists would go along to sort of say hello to Honey, but of course they couldn't really get that close because they're not allowed inside the park. So I guess it was just from afar, and one of them sounded quite concerned and basically said, she's showing signs of typical behavior and signs of, stress. Now, it was actually the Dolphin Project who got in touch and said, look, we're really worried about Honey. She needs to be moved. and it got to the point where they said, we will pay to have her moved. Surely at some point you'd be like, oh, that's a good deal. You know, even if you're like, well, I haven't got enough money to sort it out. Oh, but there's someone here who is willing to pay me money for one dolphin, and yet it didn't happen. You know, it's crazy that the owners didn't actually want to help out. Now, at some point, the park did actually get sold. So they then got in contact with the new owners, and yet they didn't want to do anything for honey. You know, I thought maybe they refused the dolphin project because they had their own idea of doing something with honey, setting her free or putting her into a sanctuary or who knows. But no, they just refused. And I don't even know what the reason was. I don't even know if they gave a reason. And you just think, okay, loads of people are unhappy. I think roughly around 800 emails and letters were sent saying, you know, come on, we need to help this poor dolphin who's completely on their own. You know, have a heart kind of thing. So the marine park is actually in the town of Choshi, but the local officials, they're not actually allowed to go into the park, you know, if they haven't got permission. And, you know, they don't really have the authority to sort of persuade the owners or say to the owners, you know, look, this isn't right, you need to sort this out. Unfortunately, it's completely up to the owners what they want to do with their own park. But you just think there should be a line somewhere that says actually it's completely and utterly illegal to have an abandoned aquarium park with animals that are still in there. And there was one report, I don't know how true this was. I saw some photos, but they weren't really close up. But I think someone did say, you know, the penguins were in a horrid state, you know, where they were living was dirty and they were even covered in dust. Now, I'm not sure about that because I don't know if the penguins are going to stay still for 24 hours to actually gather enough dust, but maybe it was a bit of debris or maybe some of the dust and paint from the actual sides of the tank had come off and maybe it looks like they were covered in dust. I don't know if that was a bit of an exaggeration, but the pictures, yeah, you can see that nothing is actually being kept clean anymore. So at some point, they are going to be living in a fairly dirty place. So let's talk a little bit about Honey and where she was captured. Can anyone guess? Yeah, yeah, she was captured in one of the Taiji dolphin hunts. Now, I'd like to say, isn't she lucky that she was one of the ones that was saved? But looking at the outcome, I'm not entirely sure anymore. So she was taken in 2005 to the marine park. Now, there was one article that I read, and it was on, I think the page was called the Animal Rights Centre. And yeah, it said that she was actually pregnant when she was captured and had her son when they got to the marine park, but unfortunately he did not survive. And her last companion was in 2017, and then of course she was on her own. So actually, even though the park closed in 2018, it was a little bit longer that she was actually completely on her own in the tank.
A lonely dolphin sparking outrage in Japan this week. Honey among the animals stuck in a derelict aquarium. 46 penguins and hundreds of fish and reptiles, all abandoned. Located just outside Tokyo, the facility shut up shop in January. While the animals are regularly fed, pictures taken by animal welfare groups show the dolphin alone in a tiny pool. Now activists say the authorities are ignoring calls to have her and the other animals rehomed. They say the abandoned aquarium has no income and are concerned about how much longer the feeding will last.
It's just some of these other countries that it's interesting because you think if that happens somewhere else, would it be allowed to sort of carry on, because of all the stories that I've heard of sort of animal cruelty, leaving animals behind once a park has been shut down is just quite horrendous. And then, of course, to make matters worse, it didn't look as though they were actively trying to help the other animals find somewhere else to go. There was also a worry with the animal activists that, well, what if Honey was let go in the waters of Taiji and then she was captured again in one of the dolphin hunts, or worse, killed? So I thought, well, yeah, they have to set her free. It would probably have to be quite far away. But then ultimately, I think it would have been better for her to go into a sanctuary, which is what the Dolphin Project were trying to do for her. And, you know, to basically just say to someone, no, we don't want any help. We don't want any help. We're not going to do anything for these animals, but we also don't want anyone else to do anything with the animals. I don't know how they could sleep at night knowing that so many people were angry and upset that these animals were basically abandoned in this abandoned aquarium. Um, but then maybe it was like, yeah, but they're being fed. So, you know, that's okay. And it wasn't okay. So all efforts ceased at some point to try and get Honey out when they realised that the health of the dolphin was declining very, very rapidly. So I am very sad to say that 2 years after being on her own, Honey unfortunately did pass away. And I think it was early last year in 2020. And she was still in exactly the same water that she had when the park closed. So I can't even imagine how disgusting that would have been. You know, pretty much swimming in your own filth. I would like to think that maybe it was changed at some point. But a lot of the reports were like, no, the staff members would go in, feed, and kind of leave. And there was one video that I found. There was a guy who sort of tried to get as close as possible, and you can just see a little bit of Honey, and you can still see some of the penguins as well. But of course, you know, we're in 2021. Penguins are still there. I don't know how the reptiles and fish are currently doing at the moment, but I think it was so sad to hear that unfortunately she did actually pass away. Not particularly nice. Now, what was weird, I also heard that I think one of the employees came to maybe feed Honey and was like, I said to one of the caretakers, oh, where's where's the dolphin? And he was like, oh, you know, she's probably like under the water, so you can't really see her. But then, you know, she went near the water and was like, well, actually, it's quite shallow. I think even if, you know, an animal did dive, you'd still see their sort of shadow or whatever. And so she did worry that something had happened. And then I don't know if it was a couple of days later, a report came out that, yes, she had died. And she thought, oh, well, this caretaker lied to me then and pretended that Honey was still alive. And I'm guessing they had already, you know, taken away the dolphin. I think it's the lack of care in some of these aquariums that say that they're looking after animals, that say they've got this aquarium for the animals, and then they do something like this. That's when it really, you know, hits home. But also, I did find something out about the Taiji drive hunts. I did read this. In 2015, the Japan Association of Zoos and Aquariums agreed to stop buying dolphins from Taiji after it was threatened with expulsion from the World Association of Zoos and Aquariums. So basically, aquariums in Japan were like, well, probably shouldn't buy any from Taiji now because we'll be thrown out. But then, of course, they decided, well, we don't need to be in the association anymore, and we'll just carry on doing it on our own, which unfortunately is what happened because they still happen today. That's what's scary is the people or the aquariums that are still getting their dolphins from the drive hunts in Taiji. But I'm not going to go over that again because that was horrific. That was horrendous. And if you haven't seen that episode, yes, I do talk about Taiji and what goes on there. If you ever do watch the movie The Cove, have some tissues ready. You'll know the part when it comes up. It's only about a 3-minute clip. But yes, have your box of tissues ready. Anyway, that is it for today and the poor story of Honey. So shall we leave this on a good note, a better note? Here is one story about a shark. Most people are terrified of sharks, especially great whites. But this story turns that stereotype around. In the peak of the summer season, a great white shark washed onto a beach in Massachusetts. People immediately went to the shark and started to try by throwing water on the animal, even cheering as it became clear the shark was still alive. Eventually, they tied a rope to the shark's tail and used a boat to get the shark back in the water. Unfortunately, the shark stayed near the shore and wasn't breathing. The rescuers, including professional researchers, took the shark to open water. The shark eventually revived and showed how people are changing the way they look at sharks. And they've got many, many stories of humans helping animals. So yes, if you want a bit of a pick-me-up, definitely read some of those. I think I'd be pretty terrified to help out a great white shark, but I'd like to think that I would help. If there were lots of other people there, then yes, I would definitely give it a go. Okay, well, until next time, bye.